Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana Harinkyu if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today, we're going to update you on something that we've talked about several times before on this show, and that is the Warrior Met coal strike. Now, if you haven't really kept up with this, here's a quick recap. So, about 1,100 workers walked off the job in Tuscaloosa County at the Warrior Met coal plant on April the 1st. Now, this means we are 9 months into this strike. And again, about 1,100 workers walked off the job then. So there's been a lot happening. We're going to recap that here with our reporter, Bill Thornton, who has been on this story since the strike started in April. But today, that those strikers at the Warrior Met Coal had a call with Senator Elizabeth Warren. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's unfolded in this strike and also what is next. So, Bill, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for explaining a little bit of this. And this is something that is in its ninth month now, and I don't think most people really expected this to last that long.
No, they didn't. If you recall, the strike began April the 1st, and about 2 weeks into the strike, there was a offer from the company that was tentatively accepted, and then the union voted on it and overwhelmingly rejected it. And we've pretty much been in that pattern since then. There have been, there was picket lines, there were court action having to do with the picket lines, there was allegations of violence on both sides, and the pretty much there hasn't been as much activity since then that you would see if you drove past the mines down in Tuscaloosa County. So what has happened is the union has began this strategy of mass demonstrations, but instead of here in Tuscaloosa, they have staged them in New York to kind of try to spotlight this issue that they have where, for background, the reason that this contract came up the last time, it was 2016, the union and the company renegotiated their contract when Warrior Met Coal was formed out of the old company. And what the union contends is when that contract was renegotiated, the workers lost a lot of benefits with the expectation that, okay, if you play ball with us right now, down the line, when we're making more money, we will renegotiate a better contract and restore some of those rights. Well, the union says that when that contract expired and they renegotiated this new contract, they did not see any of those concessions. So the event today was basically another one of those. Instead of a live demonstration on the street like you've seen in front of some of these equity firms in New York, this was a conference call that was hosted by Liz Schuler, the president of the AFL-CIO, Cecil Roberts, who's the president of the United Mine Workers of America, and Senators Sherrod Brown and Elizabeth Warren. And it was mainly to spotlight this legislation that Elizabeth Warren has been talking about for several months that has to do with these private equity firms. The contention of the union and the senators and others is that when the Warrior Met Coal was formed out of the Walter Energy Company, it was kind of like they just flipped it. They stripped it down. They got as much concessions as they could so they could make profits and then, flip it to somebody else. And then, a lot of people made a lot of money except for the workers who, are in the mines. And that's kind of what was being spotlighted today, is this idea that private equity is that these firms are taking benefits away from workers in order to maximize profits for investors, and then move on to the next company to do the exact same thing. And what was being talked about today was legislation that will try to keep this from happening. That's being proposed in the Senate and in the House, I think.
Well, and something that I want to note here, and this is from a story you wrote recently, and I can link that here in the comment thread as well. But the numbers on this strike and the numbers that this company is still making and the money that they reported in the third quarter. So the strike has cost the company about $6.9 million, according to some of their reports from that third quarter earnings. And their net income during the third quarter was $38.4 million. So they are still making a lot of money in the mines in Tuscaloosa County. County at Warrior Met Coal. So they're still making a lot of money, relatively $6.9 million. If that's what they've lost in the strike, are they going to, do they have the incentive, right, to go ahead and make concessions to get those workers back, to end this strike? Or is that $6.9 million, is that just kind of a wash at this point for the company?
Well, it should be noted that when you compare this to say what they were making before the pandemic, this is good, but it's not anywhere near what they were making before. Those costs are not just security costs. That is, they had to shut down, I believe, 2 of their mines because of the strike. They were being left idle, so that's some of their costs as well. The Warrior Met Coal makes what's called met coal, which is used in steel production, and mostly, I believe, this is coming off memory, so I apologize. Most of their customers are international markets, and those markets have been affected by inflation, just like everything else, due to the pandemic. So they are making money because of the demand for coal, because of the cost of coal, and everything. But the company would argue that the profits that they're making are nothing compared to what they were making before the pandemic and its effects on things. So, it was encouraging in that's the best. I believe that's the best quarter that they've had since the pandemic started. But it also shows how much the strike is costing them.
And something too that I think a lot of people are asking, and you touched on a minute ago, but I want to go back, and that is what exactly Senator Warren's involvement here is. So we know that there has been some court orders regarding the picket lines in Tuscaloosa County. We know that people are not out there doing those picket lines and those demonstrations in Tuscaloosa County like we had seen earlier this year and in this 9-month period. After there was some violence on the picket lines, that was stopped. You said that some of these strikers have moved up to New York, not moved as in permanently, but they have moved some of their demonstrations, right, up to New York. They have taken to streets a little bit differently than in Tuscaloosa County to get their point across. So what exactly was the point of this call today with Senator Warren? She is not a senator from Alabama. She doesn't necessarily have any ties to Alabama or any relation to Alabama or really even to coal mines in general. So tell us a little bit about why Senator Warren and why the strikers decided to meet with her today.
Well, if you recall, this is one of Senator Warren's main focuses has been these workers' rights and reining in what she calls crony capitalism, predator capitalism, however you want to phrase it. And this kind of spotlights some of those messages that she's been on, pretty much for her career as a senator. And, you will recall during the Amazon Union demonstrations earlier this year that there were several Democratic lawmakers that came to Bessemer to spotlight those issues. And most of this entourage were not from Alabama. They were people who have adopted, labor issues, and this was a way to spotlight some of those issues and a way to spotlight the legislation that they have proposed to kind of take on some of these issues. And you've seen that. That's just been a basic feature of our government, where not necessarily somebody who is representing that area takes an ongoing issue to spotlight their focus. But I think you're kind of seeing it more in terms of it's very easy to do a Zoom call, as we're showing right now. It's very easy to get somebody on for 10 minutes to talk about their focus on an issue, and getting Senator Warren, Senator Brown, who are prominent spokespeople for these issues, is just another way to get attention for the strike, which is what has been going on in terms of these demonstrations in New York City. If you want national recognition, in the media of an issue, going to New York City, the largest media market in the country, it has its advantages.
What exactly did Senator Warren, Senator Brown say to these strikers? I know you were on that call. What was their message to the people who are on strike right now? As you know, I think everybody's aware we are getting into that. We're not even getting into, we are in the midst of the Christmas season. There have been a lot of messages going around about people wanting to support the strikers during this time about Christmas and the New Year and just the holiday season. So, what were Senator Warren and Brown's messages to the strikers? Are they encouraging them to keep going, to stay on strike?
Yeah, of course, the company would have their own um, message about this, but they have. This is not the first time that they've shown support for the union, by the way, but it was the usual message of stay strong, that we're all in this together, that that we as American people prosper when workers prosper. It was the pretty standard message that you get, but also having to do with we are working on this issue through legislation, trying to make it harder for people to do these things that we feel contributed to this strike. As you alluded to earlier, nobody saw this strike going as long as it has. Workers don't want to be on strike. They would rather be working. When something like this happens, then there is this enormous strain on resources, strike funds, community funds, trying to make sure that people, and especially at Christmas time, I mean, it's not just food and mortgage payments and things like that. It's the things that you would expect somebody to have at Christmas time. So it was the kind of standard message that you would expect at this time of year.
Bill, what has the company's response been to this? And also, have there been any response from Alabama's senators, from Senator Shelby or Senator Tuberville?
I have not contacted Senator Shelby or Senator Tuberville today. The company's response, company's been pretty close-lipped. I mean, the company did create a website called Warrior Met Facts, where they basically kind of try to take on some of the contentions that the union has in terms of what the union gave up on overtime pay or holidays or benefits or things like that. But they basically maintained that they're willing to negotiate. You talk to them, you talk to the union, you basically get this idea that we're just kind of waiting for somebody to make some kind of a concession where we can actually talk to each other. But it just depends on who you talk to. But there doesn't seem to have been a lot of motion, in either direction for quite some time.
Is it fair to say both Senators Shelby and Tuberville have been pretty quiet about this situation?
I don't want to speak for them, but I don't remember some kind of huge statement about this. I will say this: there has been a lot of attention paid in the Alabama legislature about the role of ALEA in this strike, particularly the use of state troopers near the picket lines in terms of security. The ALEA, was I think their statement was that they were asked to, provide security, but the union says that makes it look like they are escorting scabs, workers who are crossing the picket line onto the property, so that they have taken a side in the strike. Basically, I think that's the contention. But that's basically been the the political statements that have happened as a result of this.
Well, and it's worth noting as well, and I think you mentioned this earlier about Amazon. This is not the only conversation we have had regarding unions and unionization this year in Alabama. There was a big fight earlier this year when a Amazon facility in Bessemer had a vote on whether to unionize or not. At the end of that vote, they voted not to unionize. Now, I know that this is a completely different company and a different situation than the Warrior Met Coal one happening right now, but it is worth noting that both of these are union issues that are happening in Alabama this year. It's been a big year in that type of news for Alabama. So give us a little bit of an update about Amazon. Well, we know earlier this year that facility voted no to unionization. There's been a little bit of a development there. Bill, can you update us on that?
The National Labor Relations Board ruled, or their area representative ruled that Amazon did not conduct a free and fair election during the union vote earlier this year. What does that mean? Well, what happened was the union filed a protest having to do with the vote, and specifically it dealt with the union said, well, this is not said, this really happened. There was a post office box erected in the parking lot at the Amazon facility, and a tent was put over it. And the employees were told, put your union ballots, your mail-in union ballots, in this post office box, and as a way to get this process done fairly and quickly. Well, the union's contention is that this gave the impression that it was the company conducting the election and not the National Labor Relations Board, which is the way it's supposed to be. Not to mention the fact that, according to the NLRB, there was a company banner on the tent where you're supposed to put your ballot that had a company slogan. And the idea is that because it was in the parking lot, the company presumably could have seen who went in and put their ballot in. Also, there was a lot of attention paid to these sort of on-premises meetings that employees had prior to the vote, where the company had seminars, and outside or right there on the table as you walk in were supposedly these sort of anti-union, pro-company paraphernalia, buttons and things like that, that employees could take if they wanted. Well, the union's contention is that your supervisors are there, and they could presumably see who would take that, as a way of seeing who is, pro-company or pro-union. And so they felt like this also violated the spirit of the election. Now, that ruling is not the final say. Amazon can appeal it, and then the NLRB will have to rule at some point. But basically what it means is there could be another election, another union election. That determination has not been made final, but there could be another union election out in Amazon. And the interesting thing is that, of course, the last union election was a mail-in ballot because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, if they have a second election, it could be a normal union election, which is on premises, and usually takes place, I believe, over a couple of days, which, that could change the scope of it, the demographics of it, who participates, who doesn't participate. The funny thing about it is before there was ever a vote, if you look at the statistics, mail-in elections, where you think there wouldn't be as many restrictions to voting, actually do worse than in-person elections in terms of turnout. So you could be dealing with a whole different outcome. It's too early to say, but that's where that stands right now.
Bill, when do we expect a final decision to see if we are going to have another one of those votes for unionization at the Bessemer Amazon facility?
Who knows? This could take a while. It took a while for there to be a determination on the previous election, and that final appeal in that process. It's obviously not going to take place this year, but these wheels grind slowly, so I don't know exactly what to say in terms of that. All I know is that the process is moving forward.
I have a quick question here back on the Warrior Met coal strike. I'm getting some comments rolling in here and I'm just looking through them. And somebody had a question again about those state troopers. Now, we mentioned a few minutes ago, you mentioned ALEA, which is the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, had been on premise of the Warrior Met coal and on the picket line to escort workers who were crossing that picket line to go into work. So there's a question here of asking, has there been any mention of those state troopers escorting non-union workers from out of state to work during the strike?
Yeah, there has been. I can't remember exactly which state legislator mentioned that, but it was actually talked about during the last legislative session. I think Aaliyah's position is that they have done stuff like this before in other circumstances, mainly related to crowd control, mainly related to keeping, security in a situation. You got to remember too that these mines are, I believe, in Tuscaloosa County jurisdiction, but I'm that like I said, that's off of memory, so I could be wrong about that. But the but like I said, their position has been that this is not anything new, that they have done this before.
And again, something to note there are no picket lines happening right now. There's no big demonstrations happening outside of the mines right now because of that court order. Is that right?
There's a restraining order that keeps picket lines from a certain distance from the company property. I have not been down to Tuscaloosa County since it's been a couple of weeks at least, and I don't know exactly what the union is doing at this point. But I know that the way that the order is construed is they can continue to have demonstrations, but they can't have them within a certain radius of company property. The judge who did that was trying to cut down on some of these situations where you would have people on the picket line who would be struck by cars coming in or going out, or other demonstrations like that.
And something too, I want to quickly make note of before we go here, and that is talking again about this call with Senators Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown. You talk about them meeting with the strikers from the Warrior Met call and meeting with their teams, but this was not necessarily the senator saying that they support coal or the senators saying that they support the mines. It was more the senator saying they support the strikers and their right to go on strike. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And like I said, this kind of dovetails the Elizabeth Warren has made kind of her career out of workers' rights, workers' issues, and what she would call excessive profits that are made sometimes off the back of workers.
Got it. Bill, this is a loaded conversation, both on Warrior Met Coal and on Amazon. So we appreciate you bringing all of your expertise here and really explaining it to those of us who maybe have not followed it as closely over the last 9 months as you have. So, Bill, thank you so much for all of your knowledge here. Everybody, thank you so much for your questions and thank you for watching. And Bill, I know you'll keep us updated on AL.com.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.